Angela's scream cut through the quiet parking lot. Marcus lay on the ground, unconscious, his face gray in the yellow glow of the streetlights. She dropped to her knees beside him and shook his shoulders. "Marcus, Marcus, wake up. Please wake up." Two security guards who were patrolling the parking lot heard the scream and came running. Right behind them came one of the orderlies who had helped Marcus into the wheelchair earlier. "Oh, God," the orderly said when he saw Marcus on the ground. He pressed his radio. "Medical emergency in the parking lot. We need a gurney and a team out here now." Within minutes, hospital staff rushed out with a stretcher. They carefully lifted Marcus onto it and ran back inside. Angela followed, crying and praying under her breath. This time, they did not take Marcus to the same examination room. They went straight to a trauma bay in the emergency department. A different doctor was there, a woman with dark skin and tired eyes. Her name tag said Dr. Priya Patel. She took one look at Marcus and started barking orders. "Get me an EKG right now. Start an IV. Someone check his vitals." Her hands moved quickly and surely as she examined Marcus. The EKG machine beeped and printed out a long strip of paper. Dr. Patel grabbed it, and her face went serious. "He's having a heart attack. We need to get him to the cardiac unit immediately. Page cardiology and tell them we're coming up. Move." Everything happened fast after that. Marcus was rushed through hallways and into an elevator. Angela tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "You can't go into the cardiac unit right now, Mrs. Thompson. They need to work on him. But I promise we'll update you as soon as we can. There's a waiting room on the 3rd floor." Angela found herself alone in a small waiting room with uncomfortable chairs and old magazines. She sat down and put her face in her hands. Her whole body was shaking. 20 minutes ago, a doctor had sent them home saying Marcus was fine. Now her husband was having a heart attack. How did this happen? Back in the emergency department, the staff was buzzing with shock and anger. Nurse Jennifer Chen had seen Marcus collapse on the security cameras. She had watched Dr. Patel rush him to the cardiac unit. Now she stood at the nurses' station with 3 other nurses, and they were all thinking the same thing. "That man almost died," said Nurse Maria Rodriguez. She had been working at the hospital for 15 years. "Dr. Hartwell sent him away, and he almost died in our parking lot." "It's not the first time," Nurse Chen said quietly. The other nurses looked at her. She took a deep breath. "I've been noticing it for a while now. The way Dr. Hartwell treats certain patients who look like Mr. Thompson." "You mean black patients," said Nurse Rodriguez. She was not asking a question. Nurse Chen nodded. "I didn't want to believe it at first. I told myself I was reading too much into things. But I've seen it happen again and again. He's so different with them. Colder. More dismissive. He doesn't listen to their complaints the same way." A younger nurse named Sarah Williams spoke up. "I've noticed it too. Last month there was a black woman who came in with abdominal pain. Dr. Hartwell barely examined her. He said she was probably just looking for pain medication. He sent her home. She came back 2 days later in an ambulance. Her appendix had burst. And what about that elderly man 3 weeks ago?" another nurse added. "He came in with a cough and fever. Dr. Hartwell said it was just a cold. It was pneumonia. He ended up in the ICU for a week." The stories kept coming, patient after patient that Dr. Hartwell had dismissed or treated poorly, and they all had one thing in common. They were black. The nurses stood there realizing they had all seen pieces of the same terrible pattern. They had all felt uncomfortable at times, but nobody had said anything out loud until now. "Why didn't we report this before?" Nurse Williams asked. She looked upset with herself. "Because he's been here for 20 years, Nurse Chen said. "He has friends in administration. He's respected. Who would believe us? And what if we were wrong? What if we got in trouble for making accusations?" "But we weren't wrong," Nurse Rodriguez said firmly. "And now a man almost died. We can't stay quiet anymore." Word spread through the hospital quickly. By the end of the night shift, dozens of staff members had heard about what happened to Marcus Thompson. Some people were shocked. Others were not surprised at all. Many of them had their own stories about Dr. Hartwell. In the break room, 2 black nurses who worked on the medical floor were talking. "I've been saying this for years," said Nurse Thomas Jefferson. He had worked at St. Catherine's for 12 years. But nobody wanted to listen. They said I was being too sensitive or making it about race when it wasn't. "Same here," said Nurse Lisa Washington. "I've told supervisors that something was wrong with the way some doctors treat our black patients. They told me I didn't have enough evidence. They said I was seeing patterns that weren't there. But the evidence was there. It had always been there. It was in the medical records, in the patient complaints that were never taken seriously, in the knowing looks exchanged by staff who saw but stayed silent. Up in the cardiac unit, doctors worked to save Marcus's life. They gave him medications to break up the blood clot in his heart. They monitored him carefully, watching his heart rhythm on screens. Dr. Patel stayed with him, making sure everything was done right. When Marcus finally stabilized, Dr. Patel went to the waiting room to talk to Angela. Angela jumped up when she saw the doctor coming. "Your husband is alive," Dr. Patel said first, and Angela burst into fresh tears of relief. "He had a significant heart attack. We were able to treat him, but it was close. If he had gotten here even 15 minutes later, we might have lost him." Angela sat down hard in her chair. "But we were here," she said, her voice breaking. "We were here an hour ago. We told that other doctor that Marcus was in pain. We told him about the family history. And he sent us away." Dr. Patel's face was grim. She sat down next to Angela. "I know," she said softly. "I've seen the notes in his chart. I've talked to the nurses. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry this happened to your husband. It should not have happened." "Why did that doctor turn us away?" Angela asked. "Was it because we're black? Is that why he didn't care?" Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. She could not officially say what she thought, not yet. But she looked Angela in the eyes and said, "I don't know for certain what was in Dr. Hartwell's mind. But I know that what happened to your husband was wrong. And you have every right to file a complaint." A social worker came by later that night. She was a kind woman named Rebecca Torres. She sat with Angela and explained how to file a formal complaint with the hospital's patient advocate office. She also quietly mentioned that Angela might want to consider contacting a lawyer. Angela was exhausted and overwhelmed. But she knew one thing for certain. This could not just be swept under the rug. Marcus had almost died because a doctor did not take him seriously. How many other people had this happened to? How many other black patients had been turned away or ignored? While Angela sat with the social worker, taking notes and getting information, something else was happening. Nurse Chen had gone home after her shift, but she could not sleep. She kept seeing Marcus collapse on the security camera footage. She kept thinking about all the other patients over the years. She picked up her phone and opened Facebook. Her hands shook as she typed out a post. She did not name the hospital or the doctor, but she told the story of what she had witnessed. A black man with chest pain and a family history of heart disease, dismissed by a doctor and sent home. The man collapsed in the parking lot and nearly died. "I've worked in healthcare for years," she wrote, "and I've stayed silent about things I've seen because I was scared. But I can't be silent anymore. We have to do better. We have to believe patients when they tell us something is wrong, no matter what they look like." She posted it at 2 a.m. By the time the sun came up, it had been shared hundreds of times. People commented with their own stories of being dismissed or mistreated by doctors. Many of them were black. Many of them had felt like no one would believe them if they spoke up. The whispers that started in the emergency department were growing louder. They were spreading beyond the hospital walls out into the community. People were starting to talk. They were starting to ask questions. And they were not going to stay quiet anymore. In his hospital bed, Marcus slowly opened his eyes. Angela was there holding his hand. "You're going to be okay," she whispered to him. "You're alive, and you're going to be okay." But both of them knew that even though Marcus had survived, nothing would ever be quite the same again. The story spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, 3 days after Marcus's heart attack, the hospital administration could no longer pretend nothing had happened. The CEO of St. Catherine's Hospital, Patricia Morrison, walked into her office to find her phone ringing off the hook and her email inbox full of angry messages. Patricia was a businesswoman first and a healthcare administrator second. She had run St. Catherine's for 8 years, and her main concern had always been keeping the hospital profitable and maintaining its reputation. Now that reputation was under attack, and she did not like it one bit. She called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. Around the table sat the hospital's chief medical officer, the head of human resources, the legal counsel, and several department heads. Everyone looked worried. "This is a public relations nightmare," Patricia said, tapping her pen on the table. "We have protesters gathering outside the hospital. The local news wants to do a story. Social media is going crazy. We need to control this situation immediately. Dr. Michael Brennan, the chief medical officer, cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we need to focus on more than just PR here. A patient was nearly killed because he didn't receive proper care. We need to investigate what actually happened. Of course we'll investigate, Patricia said quickly. But we also need to protect the hospital. Dr. Hartwell has been with us for 20 years. He's performed hundreds of successful procedures. We can't just throw him under the bus because of one incident. One incident? Said Linda Kumar, the head of human resources. She had a folder in front of her. I've been going through our records. There have been multiple complaints about Dr. Hartwell over the years. Most of them came from black patients or their families. They all said similar things. That he was dismissive, that he didn't listen, that he rushed through examinations. Why wasn't this brought to my attention before? Patricia demanded. Linda looked uncomfortable. The complaints were investigated by his department head each time. They were always dismissed as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. Dr. Hartwell is close friends with Dr. Stevens, who was the cardiology department head until last year. The complaints never made it past that level. Patricia felt a headache forming. This was worse than she thought. What do we do about Dr. Hartwell now? The legal counsel, a man named Robert Chang, spoke up. We need to place him on administrative leave immediately. Not as punishment, but while we conduct a full investigation. If we don't do that, it will look like we're protecting him. He's not going to like that, Patricia said. I don't care what he likes, Dr. Brennan said firmly. We have a patient who nearly died. We have a pattern of complaints. We have staff members who are coming forward with concerns. This is serious, Patricia. This isn't just about protecting the hospital's image. This is about patient safety and civil rights. Patricia knew he was right, but it made her angry. She had built a successful hospital. And now one doctor's behavior was threatening everything. Fine, she said. Put him on leave. But we need to handle this carefully. Make it clear that this is just a precaution during the investigation. We're not saying he did anything wrong yet. That afternoon, Dr. Hartwell was called into Patricia's office and told he was being placed on administrative leave with pay. He was furious. This is ridiculous, he shouted. That man had indigestion. It's not my fault, he collapsed later. You can't blame me for this. Richard, calm down, Patricia said. This is just temporary while we look into what happened. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure? Dr. Hartwell's face was red. You're crucifying me because I won't bow down to the mob. That patient and his wife are playing the race card and you're falling for it. That's enough, Dr. Brennan said sharply. You will not speak about patients that way. Go home, Richard. We'll contact you when the investigation is complete. Dr. Hartwell stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Patricia and Dr. Brennan looked at each other. That didn't help his case, Dr. Brennan said quietly. News of Dr. Hartwell's suspension leaked within hours. By that evening, reporters were doing live broadcasts from outside the hospital. One local news anchor, a young black woman named Keisha Williams, had been following the story closely. She stood in front of St. Catherine's Hospital with a microphone. Dr. Richard Hartwell has been placed on administrative leave following allegations that he refused to properly treat a black patient suffering from a heart attack, she reported. But Marcus Thompson is not the only patient making complaints. We've spoken with several other former patients who say they experienced similar treatment from Dr. Hartwell. The news segment showed interviews with other patients. There was Denise Miller, a mother whose son had trouble breathing. Dr. Hartwell had told her it was just anxiety and sent them home. The boy ended up in the hospital 2 days later with severe asthma. There was Jerome Washington, an elderly man who came in with chest pain months before Marcus. Dr. Hartwell had said it was probably heartburn. It was pneumonia, and Jerome spent a week in intensive care. I thought I was crazy, Denise said to the camera, tears in her eyes. I thought maybe I was overreacting. But now I see it wasn't just me. He didn't listen to any of us. All of these patients were black. That pattern was impossible to ignore now. Community activists were already organizing. Pastor Michael Harris from the Greater Faith Baptist Church had heard about what happened to Marcus. Marcus and Angela were members of his congregation. On Sunday morning, he stood in his pulpit and told the whole story to his church. Brothers and sisters, he said, his voice ringing through the church. We have talked about racism in healthcare before. We have talked about how our community is not treated the same way in hospitals and doctors' offices. But this time we are not going to just talk. We are going to act. The congregation responded with calls of Amen, and that's right. Pastor Harris organized a protest for the following week. He reached out to other community leaders, to the local NAACP chapter, to activist groups. The response was overwhelming. People were angry. They were tired of being dismissed and ignored. They were ready to demand change. By Wednesday, a crowd of over 200 people gathered outside St. Catherine's Hospital. They carried signs that said, "Black Lives Matter in Healthcare," to "and listen to Black patients," and "justice for Marcus Thompson." They chanted and sang and told their stories to anyone who would listen. Inside the hospital, staff watched from windows. Some of them felt defensive. They worked hard to help people, and now they were being painted as part of the problem. But others understood. They had seen the inequality with their own eyes. They knew the protesters had a point. The state medical board announced they were opening their own investigation into Dr. Hartwell's medical license. This was serious. If they found evidence of negligence or discrimination, he could lose his license to practice medicine entirely. Angela Thompson became the face of the movement, though she never wanted that role. Reporters kept calling her for interviews. At first she said no. She just wanted to focus on Marcus and help him recover. But then she realized that staying silent would not change anything. She agreed to an interview with Keisha Williams. They sat in Angela's living room, and Angela told the whole story. How Marcus had complained of chest pain. How they rushed to the hospital. How Dr. Hartwell had barely examined him and sent them away with cruel words about "you people who overreact." "My husband almost died," Angela said, looking directly into the camera. "And I believe it's because of the color of his skin." That doctor looked at Marcus and saw someone whose pain didn't matter, whose life didn't matter. How many other people has this happened to? How many other families have lost loved ones because they weren't taken seriously? The interview went viral. It was shared thousands of times on social media. News outlets across the state picked it up. Suddenly, what happened at St. Catherine's Hospital was not just a local story anymore. It was part of a national conversation about racism in healthcare. Medical journals and healthcare organizations issued statements. Studies were cited showing that Black patients were consistently undertreated for pain, that their symptoms were dismissed more often, that they received lower quality care even when they had the same insurance as white patients. This was not just about one bad doctor at one hospital. This was a systemic problem. More victims came forward every day. Some of them had been patients of Dr. Hartwell. Others had experienced similar treatment from different doctors at different hospitals. They all told variations of the same story. They had been in pain or sick or scared, and they had not been believed. A young college student named Tamara Johnson spoke to reporters about her experience at St. Catherine's 6 months earlier. She had severe abdominal pain and went to the emergency room. Dr. Hartwell was on duty that night. He asked her a few questions and then said she was probably just having period cramps or looking for attention. She ended up at a different hospital the next day, where doctors found she had appendicitis. Her appendix had ruptured. She nearly died from the infection. "I was 19 years old," Tamara said. "I was scared and in pain, and that doctor made me feel like I was being dramatic, like I was wasting his time. I'll never forget the way he looked at me, like I was nothing." Marcus Thompson felt the pain start during dinner. It began as a small ache in his chest, like someone was pressing down on him. He tried to ignore it and kept eating the chicken his wife Angela had made. But the pain got worse. It spread to his left arm and up to his jaw. Sweat formed on his forehead even though the house was cool. "Marcus, what's wrong?" Angela asked. She had been married to him for 20 years and knew when something was not right. She saw him holding his chest and breathing hard. "I don't know," Marcus said. His voice was quiet and strained. "My chest hurts. It hurts bad." Angela's eyes went wide with fear. Her father had died from a heart attack when she was young. She knew these signs. "We're going to the hospital right now," she said. She grabbed her purse and car keys. There was no time to argue. The drive to St. Catherine's Hospital took 15 minutes but felt like an hour. Marcus sat in the passenger seat still holding his chest. Angela kept looking at him while she drove, making sure he was still breathing. "Hold on, baby," she kept saying. "We're almost there." When they reached the emergency room, Angela ran inside first.
"Help, please, someone help!"
"My husband is having chest pain." A nurse at the front desk looked up. She called for help right away. 2 orderlies came out with a wheelchair and brought Marcus inside. The waiting room was busy that night. People sat in chairs holding sick children or pressing ice packs to injuries. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything smelled like cleaning products and fear. Angela filled out forms with shaking hands while Marcus sat in the wheelchair, his eyes closed, trying to breathe through the pain. After 20 minutes, a nurse called them back to an examination room. Her name tag said Jennifer Chen. She was kind and efficient. She checked Marcus's blood pressure and pulse. She asked him questions about his symptoms and wrote everything down carefully. "The doctor will be here soon," Nurse Chen said. She gave Marcus a reassuring smile before she left. They waited in the small room. Marcus lay on the examination table while Angela sat in a chair next to him, holding his hand. The pain in his chest was still there, heavy and frightening. "I'm scared, Angela," he whispered. "I know, baby. But we're at the hospital now. They're going to help you," she said. But inside, her own fear was growing. The door opened and a tall white man in a white coat walked in. His name tag read Dr. Richard Hartwell, Cardiology. He had gray hair and looked to be in his 50s. He carried a clipboard and barely looked at Marcus when he entered. "Mr. Thompson," he said, glancing at the clipboard. His voice was flat and cold. "Yes, that's me," Marcus said. He tried to sit up a bit. "Doctor, I have this pain in my chest, and when did it start?" Dr. Hartwell interrupted. He still had not really looked at Marcus's face. "About an hour ago, during dinner. And it's getting worse. My arm hurts too, and my jaw," Marcus explained. He was trying to stay calm, but the pain and fear made his voice shake. Dr. Hartwell sighed like this was wasting his time. He walked over and put his stethoscope on Marcus's chest for about 5 seconds. He did not ask Marcus to take deep breaths. He did not check his pulse carefully. He just stood there with a bored expression on his face. "Blood pressure?" he asked Nurse Chen, who had come back into the room. 140/90, she answered. Her voice sounded concerned. Dr. Hartwell shrugged. "That's not terrible." He turned to Marcus. "You're probably just having indigestion. Did you eat something spicy for dinner?" Marcus and Angela looked at each other in confusion. "No, just regular chicken and vegetables," Angela said. "But doctor, he has a family history of heart disease. His brother had a heart attack last year and his father." "I've been a cardiologist for 20 years, Dr. Hartwell cut her off. His tone was dismissive and annoyed. "I think I know the difference between a heart attack and an upset stomach. But the pain is really bad," Marcus said. "And it's in my arm and jaw too. I read that those are signs of—" "Everyone reads things on the internet these days and thinks they're dying," Dr. Hartwell said. He crossed his arms. "You people come in here all the time, overreacting to every little pain. Do you know how many real emergencies we have to deal with tonight?" The words hung in the air. "You people." Angela felt her face get hot with anger, but also with shock. Was he really saying what she thought he was saying? Nurse Chen stood by the door, her face tight with discomfort. She had worked with Dr. Hartwell for 8 years. She had seen him treat other patients with kindness and careful attention. But she had also noticed something else over the years. When patients like Marcus came in, patients with brown or black skin, Dr. Hartwell was different. Colder, faster to dismiss their complaints. She had told herself she was imagining it, but now watching him brush off Marcus's obvious distress, she could not deny it anymore. "Doctor, please," Angela said. She was trying to keep her voice steady. "Just run some tests. An EKG or something, please, I'm begging you." Dr. Hartwell looked at his watch. "That would take time and resources that we need for actual emergencies. Look, take some antacids when you get home. Rest. If it still hurts tomorrow, see your regular doctor." He was already moving toward the door. "But what if it's serious?" Marcus asked. The pain was getting worse, spreading across his chest like fire. "It's not," Dr. Hartwell said firmly. He looked at Marcus for the first time with direct eye contact, and his eyes were cold and hard. "You're fine. You're just anxious and overreacting. We can't waste hospital resources on people who panic over minor discomfort. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real patients to see." He walked out of the room without another word. Nurse Chen stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something. Her mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she said quietly, "I'll get your discharge papers." She left the room quickly. Marcus and Angela sat in stunned silence. "Did that just happen?" Marcus asked. "I think so," Angela said. Tears formed in her eyes. She was angry and scared and confused all at once. That man just turned you away. He didn't even really examine you. Maybe he's right, Marcus said, though he did not believe it. The pain in his chest was real and getting worse. Maybe it is just indigestion. No, Angela said firmly. She wiped her eyes. Something is wrong, I know it. We should ask for another doctor. But when they tried, the nurse at the desk told them Dr. Hartwell was the cardiologist on duty. If they wanted a second opinion, they would have to go to another hospital across town. That would take another 30 minutes of driving. Marcus felt exhausted and humiliated. He just wanted to go home. Let's just go, he said quietly. They walked out of the emergency room together, Marcus moving slowly and still holding his chest. Behind them, Nurse Chen watched them go. She felt sick to her stomach. This was not right. This was not right at all. She looked around at the other nurses and staff. Some of them had seen what happened. Some of them looked troubled too. The whispers started small, just a few words exchanged between Nurse Chen and another nurse. Did you see how he treated that man? But whispers have a way of growing. By the end of the shift, everyone in the emergency department was talking about it. Marcus and Angela made it to the parking lot. The night air was cool and helped Marcus breathe a little easier. But then as they reached their car, Marcus suddenly gasped. The pain in his chest exploded. His legs gave out under him. "Marcus!" Angela screamed as her husband collapsed onto the pavement. Governor James Sullivan sat in his office in the state capitol and watched the news coverage of the protests at St. Catherine's Hospital. He had been following the story since it first broke, but tonight something about it would not let him rest. He kept thinking about Marcus Thompson lying on that examination table, begging for help and being turned away. The governor was 52 years old. He had been in politics for most of his adult life, serving first in the state legislature and then winning 2 terms as governor. He had built his career on being careful and measured. His advisors always told him to think about how things would look, to consider the political consequences before taking action. But some things were bigger than politics. James Sullivan was the grandson of a civil rights activist. His grandfather had marched with Dr. King in the 1960s. His grandmother had been denied medical care at a whites-only hospital in Mississippi when she was pregnant with his father. She had to drive 40 miles to find a hospital that would treat black patients. By the time she got there, she had almost lost the baby. His father had survived that day, but the story had haunted James his whole life. And now, 60 years later, the same thing was still happening. Different hospital, different state, but the same cruel dismissal of black pain and black lives. "Sir, you have a call from your chief of staff," his assistant said. Poking her head into the office, James picked up the phone. His chief of staff, David Martinez, did not sound happy. "Governor, I heard you're thinking about going to St. Catherine's Hospital. I really think we should talk about this first." "What's there to talk about?" James said. "A man nearly died because a doctor didn't take him seriously. There's a pattern of discrimination. I need to see it for myself. With all due respect, sir, this is a local issue. It's not something the governor's office typically gets involved in. And if you go there, you're putting yourself in the middle of a controversy. What if the investigation clears the doctor? What if this whole thing is overblown?" James felt his jaw tighten. "Overblown? David, have you watched the interviews? Have you heard the stories from all those other patients? This isn't overblown. This is real. I understand that, sir. But we have to think about the political implications. You're up for re-election next year. The medical lobby is powerful. Doctors' associations could come after you if they think you're attacking one of their own." "Let them," James said firmly. "I didn't become governor to play it safe. I became governor to make a difference. And this matters, David. This really matters." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, David sighed. "You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Then let me at least set it up properly. We'll coordinate with the hospital. Bring some state health officials, make it official. If you're going to do this, let's do it right." "Thank you, David. Set it up for as soon as possible." When James hung up the phone, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. A sense of purpose, a certainty that he was doing the right thing, even if it was politically risky. The announcement came the next morning. The governor's office issued a press release stating that Governor Sullivan would be visiting St. Catherine's Hospital to meet with patients, families, staff, and administrators regarding allegations of racial discrimination in medical care. He would be accompanied by the state health commissioner and representatives from the Civil Rights Division of the Attorney General's office. The news hit the hospital like a bomb. Patricia Morrison, the CEO, called another emergency meeting. This time, everyone looked even more worried than before. "The governor is coming," Patricia said, her voice tight with stress. "The actual governor. This has officially become a state-level crisis." "When?" asked Dr. Brennan. "Next Tuesday. 3 days from now." The legal counsel, Robert Chang, looked grim. "This is serious. When the governor gets involved personally, especially with civil rights representatives, it means they're looking at potential legal action. This could go beyond just the medical board investigation." "What do we do?" Patricia asked. She had been running hospitals for 20 years, but she had never dealt with anything like this. "We cooperate fully," Robert said. "We give them access to whatever they want to see. We don't hide anything. If we try to cover this up or obstruct in any way, it will only make things worse." Dr. Brennan nodded. "And we need to start making changes now before he gets here. We can't just wait for the governor to tell us what to do. We need to show that we're taking this seriously." Over the next 3 days, St. Catherine's Hospital moved faster than it had in years. A committee was formed to review patient complaints and outcomes, specifically looking at whether there were racial disparities. New protocols were drafted for handling patient complaints. Mandatory training sessions on implicit bias were scheduled for all staff, but not everyone was happy about these changes. Some doctors felt like they were being accused of something they had not done. They had dedicated their lives to helping people, and now they were being told they were part of the problem. Dr. Richard Hartwell, still on administrative leave, was furious. He hired a lawyer and released a statement through his attorney. The statement said that he was being unfairly scapegoated, that he had always treated all patients equally, and that the accusations against him were motivated by people who wanted to profit from a lawsuit. Dr. Hartwell is a dedicated physician who has saved countless lives over his 20-year career, his lawyer said in a press conference. "The rush to judgment against him is wrong and dangerous. We live in a time when anyone can make accusations on social media and destroy a person's reputation. Dr. Hartwell deserves due process, not a witch hunt." But the lawyer's words rang hollow when reporters asked about the specific cases. What about Denise Miller's son, who was sent home with breathing problems? What about Jerome Washington, who was dismissed when he had pneumonia? What about Tamara Johnson's ruptured appendix? And most importantly, what about Marcus Thompson, who nearly died in the parking lot? The lawyer had no good answers. He said each case would be reviewed individually, that there were always two sides to every story, that sometimes patients do not give doctors complete information. But the more he talked, the worse it sounded. Meanwhile, community activists were planning their own reception for the governor. Pastor Michael Harris and other leaders wanted to make sure that when Governor Sullivan came to St. Catherine's, he would hear directly from the people who had been hurt by discrimination. They organized a community meeting at the church. Over 300 people showed up. Patients and families shared their stories. Some of them cried as they talked about feeling ignored, dismissed, and dehumanized when they needed medical care. "We need to show the governor that this is not just about one doctor," Pastor Harris said. "This is about a system that doesn't value Black lives the way it should. We need real change, not just apologies and promises." They created a list of demands to present to the governor. They wanted mandatory anti-racism training for all healthcare workers in the state. They wanted independent oversight of patient complaints involving discrimination. They wanted hospitals to track patient outcomes by race and make that data public. They wanted accountability. Angela Thompson stood up and spoke at the meeting. Marcus was home now, recovering from his heart attack. He was alive, but the experience had changed both of them forever. "My husband is one of the lucky ones," Angela said, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. "He survived. But how many people didn't? How many people went home from that hospital and died because they weren't taken seriously? We'll never know. And that's what breaks my heart. We'll never know how many lives have been lost because of this." The room was silent except for the sound of people crying. Everyone there knew someone who had been dismissed by a doctor, someone who had not gotten the care they needed, someone who had been made to feel like their pain did not matter. On the other side of town, in a nice suburban house, Dr. Hartwell sat in his living room and stewed in his anger. He felt like the victim in all of this. He had dedicated his life to medicine, and now his reputation was destroyed. All because one patient had a heart attack and people wanted someone to blame. His wife tried to comfort him, but he pushed her away. He poured himself another drink and turned on the television. Every channel seemed to be talking about him, about the hospital, about racism in healthcare. He changed the channel over and over, but the story followed him. His phone rang. It was an old friend from medical school. "Richard, I saw the news. Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay," Richard snapped. "My career is over because I won't play along with this politically correct nonsense. That patient had indigestion and everyone knows it. But because he's black, suddenly I'm the villain." His friend was quiet for a moment. "Richard, be honest with me. Did you really examine him properly? Did you take his symptoms seriously?" "Of course I did." Richard lied. But even as he said it, he knew it was not true. He had barely looked at Marcus Thompson. He had made assumptions the moment he walked in the room. But admitting that, even to himself, was too painful. So he pushed the truth away and clung to his anger instead. Monday came, and then Tuesday morning. Governor James Sullivan woke up early in his hotel room. He had driven to the city the night before so he would be ready for his visit to the hospital. He ate a light breakfast and read through his briefing materials one more time. His staff had prepared thick folders with information. Details about Dr. Hartwell's history, statistics about healthcare disparities, summaries of patient complaints, data about outcomes at St. Catherine's Hospital compared to other facilities. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. Black patients at St. Catherine's had worse outcomes than white patients, even when they came in with the same conditions. They waited longer to be seen. They received less pain medication. They were more likely to be sent home without thorough examinations. The data was damning. At 9 o'clock, the governor's motorcade pulled up to St. Catherine's Hospital. News cameras were everywhere. Protesters were there too, but these protesters were not angry. They were hopeful. They held signs thanking the governor for coming, asking him to bring justice and change. Governor Sullivan stepped out of his car. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple suit, nothing too fancy. He wanted people to see him as approachable, as someone who cared, not as a distant politician. Patricia Morrison met him at the entrance, along with Dr. Brennan and other hospital leadership. She tried to smile, but it looked forced. "Governor Sullivan, welcome to St. Catherine's. We're glad you're here." James shook her hand. "Thank you for having me, Ms. Morrison. I know this is difficult, but it's important work." "Yes, of course," Patricia said. "We've prepared a conference room where we can meet and discuss." "Actually," James interrupted gently, "I'd like to start by visiting Marcus Thompson. Is he still here?" Patricia looked surprised. "Oh, well, no, Mr. Thompson was discharged several days ago. He's recovering at home." "Then let's go see him at home," James said simply. His staff had not planned for this, but they scrambled to make it happen. Within an hour, Governor James Sullivan was standing on the front porch of Marcus and Angela Thompson's home, knocking on their door. Angela heard the knock on the door and looked through the window. When she saw the cars outside and the man in the suit standing on her porch, her heart started racing. She recognized him immediately. It was the governor, Marcus. She called out, "Marcus, come here. You're not going to believe this." Marcus walked slowly from the bedroom. He was still recovering, still tired and weak. The doctors had told him it would take time to get his strength back. When he saw who was at the door, his eyes went wide. Angela opened the door with shaking hands. "Governor Sullivan?" "Yes, ma'am," James said with a warm smile. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced like this. I was at the hospital and I wanted to meet you and your husband. May I come in?" Of course," Angela said, stepping back. She was suddenly very aware that she was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt, that the house was not perfectly clean, that she had not prepared for this at all. But the governor did not seem to care about any of that. James walked into their living room and went straight to Marcus. He held out his hand. "Mr. Thompson, I'm James Sullivan. How are you feeling?" Marcus shook his hand, still stunned. "I'm doing better, sir. Thank you for asking. Please sit down," James said. "I don't want you to tire yourself out. And call me James." They all sat down in the living room. The governor's security detail stayed outside, giving them privacy. Angela offered coffee and the governor accepted. She went to the kitchen with trembling hands to make it, trying to process what was happening. When she came back with the coffee, James was already talking with Marcus. asking him about his job, his family, his life. He was not acting like a politician gathering information. He was acting like a person who genuinely cared. "Tell me what happened that night," James said gently, "if you're comfortable talking about it." Marcus took a deep breath. He had told this story so many times now to doctors, to lawyers, to reporters, but somehow telling it to the governor felt different. More important, he described the pain that started during dinner, the fear, the trip to the hospital, the hope that he would get help, and then the crushing disappointment when Dr. Hartwell walked in and barely looked at him. "He made me feel like nothing," Marcus said quietly. "Like my pain didn't matter. Like I was wasting his time." He said things like, "You people who overreact." And I knew what he meant. "I've lived with racism my whole life, sir. I know what it looks like." Angela sat next to her husband and took his hand. We told him about Marcus's family history. We begged him to run tests, but he just sent us away. "And then I collapsed in the parking lot," Marcus continued. "If those security guards hadn't been there, if those nurses hadn't rushed me back inside, I would be dead." A different doctor saved my life, Dr. Patel. She actually listened. She actually cared. James Sullivan listened to every word. His face showed anger, sadness, and determination. When Marcus finished, James was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," he finally said. "No one should ever be treated that way, especially when they're scared and in pain. And I want you to know that I'm here to make sure this doesn't keep happening to other people." "Thank you," Angela said, wiping tears from her eyes. "We just don't want anyone else to go through this." They talked for over an hour. The governor asked questions and really listened to the answers. He asked about their experience with the hospital administration, about whether they felt supported or ignored. He asked if they knew other people who had similar stories. They told him about the community meetings, about all the other patients who had come forward. When it was time to leave, James stood up and shook both of their hands again. "I promise you," he said, looking them in the eyes, "I'm going to do everything in my power to bring about real change. Not just words. Real action." After the governor left, Marcus and Angela sat together in their living room in silence. "Did that really just happen?" Marcus asked. "I think it did," Angela said. She felt something she had not felt in weeks. Hope. From the Thompsons' house, Governor Sullivan went to St. Catherine's Hospital. But he did not go to the conference room where the administrators were waiting. Instead, he asked to tour the facility. He wanted to see the emergency department, the patient rooms, the staff break areas. He wanted to see the real hospital, not the cleaned-up version they had prepared for him. Patricia Morrison walked beside him, nervous and uncomfortable. She kept trying to steer him toward the nice parts of the hospital, but he kept asking to see everything else. In the emergency department, James stopped to talk with nurses. He asked them about their work, about what they saw every day. At first, they were guarded. They knew their boss was right there listening. But something about the governor's manner made them open up. Nurse Jennifer Chen was there. When she saw the governor, she felt her heart pound. This was her chance to speak up, really speak up in a way that might actually matter. "Governor Sullivan," she said, stepping forward. "May I speak with you?" "Of course," James said. Jennifer looked at Patricia Morrison, who was frowning. But she pushed through her fear. "I've worked at this hospital for 8 years. I'm the one who saw Marcus Thompson that night. I'm the one who watched Dr. Hartwell dismiss him." "I see," James said. "Tell me what you saw." Jennifer told him everything. How Dr. Hartwell had barely examined Marcus. How different his attitude was with black patients compared to white patients. How she and other nurses had noticed this pattern for years but felt like they could not say anything. "I should have spoken up sooner," Jennifer said, her voice breaking. "I knew something was wrong, but I was scared. Scared of losing my job, scared of not being believed. And because I stayed silent, Marcus Thompson almost died." Other nurses and staff members gathered around. They started sharing their own observations, their own stories. It was like a dam breaking. All the things they had seen and stayed quiet about came pouring out. One black orderly named Thomas spoke up. "Governor, I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen black patients treated differently more times than I can count. Not just by Dr. Hartwell, by other doctors too. We get ignored when we speak up about it. We get told we're being too sensitive." A young medical resident added, "I'm in training here. I've seen how some of the older doctors model bad behavior. They make jokes about certain patients. They stereotype, and they teach us to do the same if we're not careful. Patricia Morrison tried to interrupt. "Governor, I think we should move to the conference room where we can have a more structured conversation." "No," James said firmly. "This is exactly where I need to be. These people are telling me the truth, and I'm going to listen." He spent 2 more hours at the hospital talking to staff members at every level. He spoke with janitors and technicians, residents and nurses, administrative staff and security guards. He listened to the Black employees who said they felt invisible, who said they saw different standards of care but were dismissed when they pointed it out. He also spoke with patients. He went room to room and asked people about their experiences. Some said everything was fine, but others, especially Black patients, had stories similar to Marcus's. Maybe not as dramatic, but the same theme of being dismissed, of not being heard, of feeling like their pain was not taken seriously. In the hospital cafeteria, James sat down with a group of Black employees who were on their lunch break. There were about 10 of them around the table. They looked nervous at first, but James just ate his sandwich and asked them simple questions about their lives and their work. "Can I ask you all something?" James said. "How many of you have personally witnessed Black patients being treated worse than white patients here?" Every single hand went up. "How many of you have tried to say something about it?" About half the hands stayed up. "And how many of you felt like anything changed when you spoke up?" All the hands went down. The silence at that table was more powerful than any report or statistic could be. These were not activists or protesters. These were everyday workers who saw the truth every day and felt powerless to change it. A woman named Lisa Washington, who worked in medical records, spoke up. "Governor, I love my job. I love helping people. But it breaks my heart every time I see a Black patient's file and I see how they were treated. I see the dismissive notes doctors write. I see how long they had to wait for care. I see the difference and it hurts. What would you change if you could?" James asked. The ideas came flowing out. Better training for all staff on cultural competency and implicit bias. An independent patient advocate who was not part of the hospital administration. Required reporting of patient satisfaction data broken down by race. Diversity in hospital leadership. Protection for employees who report discrimination. James took notes on everything they said. These were not politicians or administrators talking. These were the people on the front lines who saw what really happened. After his tour, Governor Sullivan finally went to the conference room where Patricia Morrison and her leadership team had been waiting for hours. They all stood up when he entered. "Please sit," James said. He did not sit at the head of the table where they had left a seat for him. Instead, he stood. "I've spent the day listening," he said. "I've listened to Marcus and Angela Thompson. I've listened to your nurses and doctors and staff. I've listened to your patients. And here's what I've learned. What happened to Marcus Thompson was not an isolated incident. It was the result of a culture that has allowed racism and discrimination to flourish in this hospital." Patricia started to speak, but James held up his hand. "Let me finish. I'm not saying everyone who works here is racist. I met many dedicated, caring healthcare workers today. But I also saw a system that has failed to protect vulnerable patients. A system where complaints were buried, where patterns were ignored, where people who tried to speak up were silenced." He looked around the table at each administrator. "That ends now. The state will be conducting a full civil rights audit of this hospital. We will review patient outcomes by race. We will examine hiring and promotion practices. We will look at every complaint that was filed and dismissed. And if we find systemic violations, there will be consequences." Patricia's face was pale. "Governor, we want to cooperate. We want to do better. We're already implementing new training programs, and training is a start," James said. "But it's not enough. Real change requires accountability. It requires transparency. It requires leadership that actually prioritizes equity over reputation." Dr. Brennan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up.
"Governor, what do you need from us?"
James appreciated the directness. "I need you to be honest. I need you to admit that there are problems instead of trying to protect the hospital's image. I need you to listen to your staff when they tell you something is wrong. And I need you to put patient care above everything else, including your bottom line." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing. I'll be introducing legislation next month. It's called Marcus's Law. It will require every hospital in this state to track and publicly report patient outcomes by race. It will establish independent oversight of discrimination complaints, and it will protect healthcare workers who speak up about inequity. This is going to change, not just at St. Catherine's, but everywhere. As the governor left the hospital, community members and protesters were still outside. They had been waiting for hours to see him. James walked over to them instead of getting in his car. Pastor Harris stepped forward. "Governor Sullivan, thank you for coming. What happens now?" "Now we fight for change," James said. "Real lasting change. And I'm going to need your help to make it happen." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. For the first time in a long time, they felt like someone in power was actually listening to them. 3 weeks after the governor's visit, St. Catherine's Hospital looked the same on the outside, but felt completely different on the inside. Change was happening, slowly but surely, and everyone could feel it. The first big change came when the investigation into Dr. Richard Hartwell concluded. The state medical board reviewed every complaint that had been filed against him over the years. They interviewed former patients and staff members. They examined medical records and outcomes. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Hartwell lost his medical license. The decision came down on a Friday afternoon. The board's statement was clear and direct. They found that Dr. Hartwell had demonstrated a pattern of providing substandard care to Black patients, that he had failed to conduct proper examinations, and that his actions had put patients at serious risk of harm. Dr. Hartwell's lawyer immediately announced they would appeal, but most people knew it was over. His career in medicine was finished. Some people felt sorry for him. Others felt he had gotten what he deserved. But everyone agreed on one thing: accountability mattered. The hospital itself faced consequences too. The civil rights audit that Governor Sullivan had ordered uncovered serious problems. Black patients at St. Catherine's had statistically worse outcomes than white patients across almost every measure. They waited longer to be seen. They received less pain medication. They were more likely to be sent home without thorough testing. They had higher rates of complications and readmissions. The hospital was placed under a consent decree. This meant they had to make specific changes and report their progress to the state regularly. If they failed to improve, they could lose their federal funding. Patricia Morrison, the CEO, resigned under pressure. The board of directors knew they needed new leadership, someone who would prioritize equity and patient care. They hired Dr. Priya Patel, the doctor who had saved Marcus Thompson's life, as the new chief medical officer. She was promoted to a leadership position because she had shown what good medicine looked like. She had listened to Marcus. She had acted quickly. She had saved his life. Now she would help reform the entire hospital. Dr. Patel's first action was to create a new patient advocacy office. This office was independent from the hospital administration. It was staffed by people from the community who could investigate complaints without fear of retaliation. If a patient felt they were treated unfairly or discriminated against, they had somewhere to turn. Jennifer Chen, the nurse who had witnessed Marcus's mistreatment and finally spoken up, was promoted to be the director of nursing education. Her job was to train all nurses and staff on how to recognize and interrupt bias in healthcare. She took the job seriously. She knew that training alone would not fix everything, but it was an important step. "We have to be willing to look at ourselves honestly," Jennifer told the first group of nurses in her training session. "We all have biases, all of us. The question is whether we're willing to recognize them and change our behavior. I know because I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I saw things that were wrong and I didn't say anything. I won't make that mistake again, and I'm asking all of you to join me." The training sessions were not easy. Some staff members got defensive. They did not like being told they might have biases. They insisted they treated all patients the same. But as the training went on, many of them started to see things differently. They started to recognize moments when they had made assumptions based on someone's race. They started to understand how their own backgrounds and experiences shaped the way they saw patients. Meanwhile, Governor Sullivan was working on his legislation. Marcus's law was introduced in the state legislature 2 months after his visit to the hospital. The bill required all hospitals to collect and publicly report data on patient outcomes by race. It established independent review boards for discrimination complaints. It protected healthcare workers who reported inequity from retaliation, and it created funding for community health centers in underserved areas. The legislation faced opposition. Some hospital administrators argued it was too expensive. Some doctors' groups said it was government overreach. The medical lobby spent money on advertising campaigns against it. But Governor Sullivan fought back. He traveled around the state, holding town halls and listening sessions. He brought Marcus and Angela Thompson with him. They told their story over and over again. People listened. They saw this was not some abstract policy debate. This was about real lives and real families. Other survivors came forward too. Denise Miller, whose son had been dismissed when he had trouble breathing. Jerome Washington, who was sent home with pneumonia. Tamara Johnson, whose appendicitis was called attention-seeking. They all testified before legislative committees. They all shared their stories with the media. They put faces and names to the statistics. Public support for Marcus's law grew. People across the state from different backgrounds and different political parties agreed that health care should be equal for everyone. Churches and community organizations rallied support. Medical students and young doctors spoke up in favor of the reforms. After months of debate and compromise, Marcus's law passed. It was not perfect. Some provisions had been weakened to get enough votes, but it was real change written into law. The signing ceremony was held at the state capitol. Governor Sullivan invited Marcus and Angela Thompson to stand with him as he signed the bill. Marcus was still recovering, still rebuilding his strength, but he made the trip. This mattered too much to miss. This law is named after Marcus Thompson, but it's really about all of us, Governor Sullivan said as he prepared to sign. It's about the kind of society we want to be. A society where everyone's pain is taken seriously, where everyone's life has value, where health care is a right, not a privilege that depends on the color of your skin. He signed his name with Marcus and Angela standing on either side of him. The room erupted in applause. People were crying. This was a moment they would remember forever. But the law was just the beginning. Real change required changing hearts and minds, changing culture and systems. That work would take years. At St. Catherine's Hospital, the changes continued. The hospital hired more diverse staff at all levels. They created a community advisory board, made up of people from the neighborhoods they served. They started tracking patient satisfaction by race and addressing problems when they found disparities. Some things got better quickly. Wait times for Black patients decreased. Prescribing patterns for pain medication became more equal. Patient complaints were taken seriously and investigated properly. Other things took longer. Changing the culture of an institution that had operated one way for decades was not easy. There were setbacks and resistance. Some staff members left because they did not like the new expectations. Others stayed but complained that things had gone too far, that they were walking on eggshells. But Dr. Patel and the new leadership team pushed forward. They knew that discomfort was part of change. They knew that the goal was not to make everyone comfortable. The goal was to provide excellent care to every patient. A year after Marcus's heart attack, the hospital released its first annual equity report. The data showed improvement in almost every area. Black patients' outcomes were getting closer to white patients' outcomes. Patient satisfaction scores among Black patients had increased significantly. The number of discrimination complaints had actually gone up. But that was because people finally felt safe reporting problems. We still have work to do, Dr. Patel said at the press conference announcing the results. But we're moving in the right direction. We're becoming the hospital that everyone in this community deserves. Marcus Thompson was there for the press conference. He had been invited as a special guest. Seeing him alive and healthy was a powerful reminder of why this work mattered. After the press conference, Marcus spoke to a group of medical students who had come to learn about the hospital's reforms. They gathered in a conference room, eager and idealistic, wanting to be better doctors than the generation before them. I almost died because a doctor didn't see me as fully human, Marcus told them. He looked at my skin color before he looked at my symptoms. He made assumptions before he made a diagnosis, and I want you to learn from that. The students listened carefully. One young woman raised her hand. Mr. Thompson, how do we make sure we don't make the same mistakes? Marcus thought for a moment. Listen to your patients. Really listen. Believe them when they tell you they're in pain. Don't let your assumptions about who they are get in the way of providing good care. And if you see another doctor treating someone unfairly, speak up. Don't stay silent like so many people did for so many years. He paused and looked around the room. You're going to be doctors soon. You'll have power that most people don't have. Power to heal, but also power to harm. Use that power wisely. Use it fairly. Use it for everyone, not just for people who look like you or come from your background. The students nodded, taking notes, absorbing every word. Marcus hoped they would remember this moment when they were out in hospitals. making real decisions about real patients. Angela Thompson had found her own calling in the aftermath of everything that happened. She became a patient advocate, working with community organizations to help people navigate the healthcare system. She taught people how to speak up for themselves, how to file complaints, how to get second opinions. She helped families who felt ignored or dismissed to find doctors who would listen. What happened to Marcus was terrible, Angela said in an interview 6 months after his heart attack. But if some good can come from it, if other people can be helped because we spoke up, then it wasn't all for nothing. Nurse Jennifer Chen also found a new purpose. Beyond her work training hospital staff, she started speaking at conferences and writing articles about the importance of healthcare workers speaking up when they witness discrimination. She was honest about her own failures, about the times she stayed silent when she should have acted. "I lived with guilt for a long time," she said in one of her talks. "Guilt about Marcus Thompson and all the other patients I saw treated poorly. But I've learned that guilt without action is useless. What matters is what we do now, how we change, how we make sure it doesn't keep happening." Her honesty and vulnerability made her an effective teacher. Other nurses and healthcare workers reached out to her, sharing their own stories of witnessing discrimination and not knowing what to do. She helped them find their voices. The community protests eventually stopped, but the organizing continued. Pastor Michael Harris and other leaders formed a healthcare equity coalition. They monitored hospitals across the city, reviewed public data on patient outcomes, and advocated for continued improvements. They made sure that the attention did not fade once the news cameras went away. 2 years after Marcus's heart attack, St. Catherine's Hospital had transformed. It was not perfect. No institution is, but it was better. Much better. The infant mortality rate among Black mothers at the hospital had decreased by 30%. This was perhaps the most important statistic of all. Black women and their babies had been dying at alarming rates for years. Now, because the hospital was finally taking their concerns seriously, more mothers and babies were surviving. Marcus Thompson returned to his job as a high school teacher. He was different now, more aware of how fragile life could be, more committed to speaking up about injustice. He incorporated lessons about healthcare equity into his social studies classes. His students listened to his story with wide eyes and angry hearts. "What happened to you isn't fair, Mr. Thompson," one student said. "No, it wasn't," Marcus agreed. "But what I want you to learn is that unfairness doesn't have to be permanent. Change is possible. It takes courage to speak up. It takes persistence to keep fighting, but change is possible." On the 2nd anniversary of his heart attack, Marcus and Angela went back to St. Catherine's Hospital, not as patients but as guests. The hospital was dedicating a new patient lounge in his name. The Marcus Thompson Patient Advocacy Center was a comfortable space where patients and families could meet with advocates, file complaints, or just find support. Dr. Patel gave a short speech at the dedication ceremony. 2 years ago, this hospital failed Marcus Thompson. We almost let him die. But Marcus and Angela didn't let that failure be the end of the story. They fought for change. They spoke truth to power, and because of them, countless other patients have received better care. She turned to Marcus and Angela. "Thank you for your courage. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for making us better." Marcus stood up to speak, Angela by his side. He looked out at the crowd of hospital staff, community members, and local officials who had gathered for the ceremony. "I didn't want to be a symbol or an activist," he said. "I just wanted to get medical care when I was in pain. But sometimes life pushes us into roles we never expected, and when that happens, we have a choice. We can shrink from it or we can rise to it." He looked at Angela and smiled. "My wife and I chose to rise. We chose to fight, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us. And we're going to keep fighting because this work is never finished. There's always more to do." The crowd applauded. Marcus felt tears in his eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or anger anymore. They were tears of hope. That night, Marcus and Angela drove home together in comfortable silence. They had been through so much together. The pain, the fear, the anger, the fight for justice. But they had made it through. And they had made a difference. "Are you okay?" Angela asked as they pulled into their driveway. Marcus thought about the question. Was he okay? His heart was damaged. He would be on medication for the rest of his life. He got tired more easily now.